Uh, Welcome back to our YouTube tutorial, and yes, today it's another day to learn about more of Laravel. And what are we covering today? We are going to look at the MVC architecture in Laravel, the MVC. Now, you need to first of all understand what is MVC. Yes, MVC, it is the software application architecture that has been designed to separate the application between three major components. Yes, and number one, that is the model. M stands for the model, then V stands for the views, and then C stands for the controllers. So to begin with, I will start with the V, which is the views. Now, to you at your end, look at the views as the UI of the application. When I talk about UI, I simply mean the user interface of the application. For example, using this example, assuming let's say we are using this Apex as our example, what you're seeing, this thing that I'm displaying, the interface, yeah, the front end, what you're seeing, this one is the UI. Now, in the Laravel application, what you see as the UI are treated as the views. And how do we create these UIs? UIs are created simply using HTML and CSS. But in Laravel, we say that views are created using the braid files. Remember, in one of our previous tutorial, we talked about the braid templating engine of Laravel. So that simply means that whenever I want to create the interface in Laravel, I use the braids. But braids are simply representing the HTML and the CSS of the application. And now these views, they reside inside the resources folder. There is a subfolder called the views. That's where we create our views. That's number one. Now, views are responsible, one, for displaying data to the user. For example, if you can see now, at least I can see this data. We build, you grow. This is Apex website. So the data that you're seeing here, what is responsible for displaying this data is simply the views. And the views are created using the braid files, and these braid files are simply containing HTML and CSS. That's number one. Then number two is we are going to go to something called the M. We are done with the V, which stands for the views. Now let me talk about the M. And M stands for the models. Now what does model do? Now these models, they just act as the intermediate between the database and the controllers. Now you just assume models, they are just like a security guard, someone who is guarding, let's say, a building. And whoever has to enter that building must be checked by this security guard. Now, models are acting as that person who is going to check whatever is entering the database and what is leaving the database. So models are simply like pipelines. They handle that data before it enters the database. So models, in our layman's understanding, treat them, maybe assuming, let's say you're developing a restaurant management system. And in that context, a restaurant management system, we are seeing chefs, we are seeing these waiters, we are seeing those people who prepare, managers and all that stuff. Now models are acting as those people who really go to the kitchen to get food. So they act as the intermediate between the client and the other person who is serving. So that's what we call the model. Now in our application, a model simply acts as a man or an intermediate between the database and the controllers. That's for the models. And now models are always just used, one, to talk to the database, to ask it to store and retrieve data, and at some point it contains a business logic. Of course, we shall explain more about what we mean by saying it contains the business logic. So in simple terms, the model is where data lives and is where data is managed. So that's the simplest term. Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about, the models. Then from knowing the models, now we're going to talk about the last component, which is the controllers. Now what are the controllers? Controllers are simply designed to handle the business logic. Yeah, controllers are designed to handle the business logic. Now let me give you an example. assuming, let's say I come to our system like this one, this website, and I go to maybe the login page here. Yeah, when I go to the login page, I'm still using the views. Now these are the views, and I want to go to the login page. Yeah, now by going to the login page, you're going to realize that I'll submit in, let's say, my credentials. That's the username and the password. Sorry, the username and the password. Okay, I think let me just switch to a more stable internet. Okay. Okay. So I was saying, okay, just one. Okay. Oh yeah. So I was saying that if you go to the login page like this, yeah, if you go to the login page like this, I don't know why whatever today is slow. Now here, assuming I want to submit in my username and password, assuming I will put in a wrong password and I try to submit. Now when I try to submit, I'm going to get this. Now who is doing the checks, the everything to ensure that the submitted logins and details are the exact logins that we have in the database? So what handles that is what we call the controllers. So the controller simply handles whatever you're sending to the model. So now if you can see well this this structure, let me maybe use this structure to explain very well. Now there's something that we didn't explain, that's called the routing, the routes. Yeah, let me first explain this so that now I explain the cycle and how it runs. Now if I go back to the application, you see now this is what we mean by a route. Here I can slash login, I can now slash, let's say, about. Let me slash about and then I show you. When I slash about, I'll simply route to the about us page. If I go, let's say, to internship, I click on internship, you see that I'll go and display the internship application. If I click on, let's say, contact, you see I'm displaying this. Now what we are doing, simply this navigation is what we refer to a route. A route, for example, now a route, what I'm pointing at now is a route called a contact route. If I click on this route you're seeing, yeah, this route you're seeing, the page I'm displaying now is the founders route. If I click on this, what you're seeing, this is a service route. Now meaning the user behind the scenes, what he doesn't see, for him he just clicks on, let's say, on any navigation link. But in the Laravel application, they are seeing that a user is pointing at a certain route, so he's requesting a certain page. So that's what we mean by this route. So whenever I click on a route, I'm simply triggering the controller to return that particular page that I'm requesting. For example, whenever I click on about, I'm trying to ask the controller that could you please point to this route and return for me this particular view, this particular braid, this particular page. That's what we mean by the controller. So let me go back to this and then I explain. Now this is number one. You see step number one, user submits a request. Now this is like a Google search engine, and this is a user, as you're seeing. Now assuming a user is seated somewhere, now which user is us? For example, right now I'm on this Google search engine and I point to what you see, what they're saying, user submits a request. Which request is when I click on, let's say, on the home page. When I click on the home page like this, I've submitted a request, and a request is routed to an appropriate Laravel controller. What they are trying to mean, we have what we call a controller, as I've just explained. A controller handles the business logic. And also the other thing, what you should know about controllers, these controllers communicate with the views because they're the ones that have to return those particular pages to be displayed. And the other thing they do also, the controllers, like it's like a centerman, because controllers talks with the views and also it talks with the models, because at some point he might want to display some data. For example, if you have some data that you want to retrieve back, now a controller does two things. It talks with the models to return back that particular data that is being requested, and also it talks with the views to return back that particular page the user is requesting. As you can see in this diagram, that a user submits a request through a route. Which route we are talking about? When I click, let's say, on contact, we are referring to this route. The slash contact is a route. Yeah, the slash contact is a route. Now when you point to the particular route like this Laravel controller route, yeah, you're going to see that that route will point to a controller and it gets back that particular page that the user is requesting through this Laravel controller. That's why you see it is this arrow is showing we go to a route talks to the controller comes to the particular view that is being requested. If it has data, it also talks with this model. As you can see this, the model will return the data like this, then we come with this, then we display that information back to the user. Yeah, that's the point. Else, the data still proceeds. As you can see, number 1 is to submit a request. Number 2, we route to an appropriate Laravel controller. Number 3, controller gets alert about a particular event, meaning can you please either return data or you go. And even if you're returning data, the data is being displayed on a page, meaning for whatever case, it has to talk with the views, then that view return back the data. Then number 4, controller can also update the model either by saying that can you please add this data to the database, or can you please retrieve the data. And then the model, what it does, it either inserts data in the database or it can query or retrieve back the data from the database. So simply, the Laravel MVC architecture has been designed to separate. There's a principle of programming called separation of concern. We know very well that each particular component handles a particular task. For example, views are handling returning data and displaying that data to the user. So it's the interface, the face of the application. Then controller simply manages the entire application, because one, it talks with the models to return back or update the database, and then it also talks with the views to return back the particular pages. That's two. Then the other thing you should also know are the models, as we have explained, and the database. So you can see really that the MVC architecture has been designed in the way that it helps to have a clean application, where every component has been designed to handle a particular task, which is very good in an application because it makes development very easy. Because you know that whenever I go to the views, I want to do this. Whenever I go to the controller, I will need to do this. That's the beauty of a framework, because the framework helps us to do all this. Now just imagine without Laravel, the messy, everything was messed up. Someone, you could find him doing database whatever in a different file, then the other one is doing, so we didn't have a structured way of handling things. But thanks to the Laravel team, that today we have a proper way. Even if I'm coding, for example, me myself, I work with the Japanese and also at times the US people. Now you're going to realize that when we are developing, I don't mind about how they are developing, because I know that all the controllers, I'll find them in a particular folder. All the models are in the particular folder. All the what. So we have a common understanding of how to design an application. Yes, I think let's meet in the next episode. Thank you so much.